Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am so glad you're here. Now, if you're stressing out about your upcoming educational psychology final, I want you to take a deep breath. Seriously, relax. Today, I'm going to act as your friendly lecturer, and my one and only goal is to help you absolutely ace that exam. We're going to break down the entire topic of intellectual abilities step by step, in simple, everyday English. There's no confusing jargon here, just exactly what you need to know to score top marks on those multiple choice and short essay questions. Let's get started. Okay, let's dive right into this. To lower your anxiety, we've organized all these complex theories into 6 highly manageable buckets. What is intelligence? Early intelligence theories, contemporary intelligence theories, measuring intelligence in tests, what makes tests good, and finally, nature, nurture, and diversity. All right, section 1, what is intelligence? Now, before we can talk about testing intelligence, we literally have to define what it actually means, right? If you look at early pioneers like Binet, Wechsler, and Sternberg, they all use slightly different words, kind of like different pieces of a giant puzzle. But there is a core thread connecting all their definitions. Pay close attention to this for your multiple choice questions. Intelligence is fundamentally the ability to adapt to your environment. It's your capacity to learn new things, adjust to changing conditions, think rationally, and act purposefully. It's not just about sitting and reading books. It's about how you actually handle the world around you. To make this super easy to picture, psychologists often break intelligence down into 3 distinct types. First up, concrete or mechanical intelligence. Think of an engineering student brilliantly building a robot. They're actively using machines and tools. Second is social intelligence. This is your class president who knows exactly how to win over their peers and navigate tricky human relationships. Third is abstract or general intelligence. This is what we traditionally think of in school, like a teacher analyzing a complex book, responding to words, numbers, and abstract ideas. Keep these everyday classroom and school examples in your head, and you'll easily spot the right answers on your exam. So the main idea is, intelligence isn't just one narrow thing. It's our overall ability to adapt, think rationally, and interact effectively with the world, whether we're working with machines, dealing with people, or processing complex ideas. Make sure you lock that foundational definition in. Moving right along to section 2, early intelligence theories. So how did the earliest psychologists try to map out the structure of our brain's abilities? Well, if you get a short essay question asking you to compare early theorists, this is your go-to information. We've got a classic debate here. Charles Spearman argued that intelligence is just one big general ability bucket. If you're bright in math, Spearman says you're probably bright in history too. On the flip side, L.L. Thurston completely disagreed. He argued that intelligence is made up of 7 completely distinct, independent buckets. Things like memory, spatial ability, and numerical ability. Thurston basically said you could be an absolute genius with numbers, but terrible with words. It's the classic 1 bucket versus 7 buckets debate. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is how theorist R.B. Cattell split intelligence into 2 very different types, crystallized and fluid. You absolutely need to know the difference between these 2 for the test. Crystallized intelligence is your learned knowledge. It increases with your education. Think of rote memorizing terms from a biology textbook. That knowledge literally crystallizes in your brain over time. Fluid intelligence, however, is your raw problem-solving power. It is completely unaffected by your formal education. Think of sitting down and solving a brand new type of visual math puzzle you have never ever seen before. You just have to figure it out on the fly. That's fluid. So the main idea is, early theories debated whether intelligence was one general ability, like Spearman thought, or several distinct skills, like Thurston thought. And remember, Cattell specifically split it into crystallized, which is learned knowledge, versus fluid, which is raw problem-solving power. Repeat those terms to yourself. General ability, crystallized, and fluid. They're going to come up. Let's shift gears to section 3, contemporary intelligence theories. Okay, so modern thinkers really broaden the definition of what it means to be smart. Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences completely shifted the paradigm. He basically said, wait a minute, being smart isn't just about reading and math. He expanded intelligence way out into 8 different slices. This includes musical rhythm, bodily kinesthetic skills for athletes, and even understanding nature. He completely blew open that traditional academic definition. And this comparison brilliantly illustrates the modern view. Contrasting these 3 contemporary theorists side by side is an absolute goldmine for short essay questions. First, you have Gardner with his 8 distinct multiple intelligences. Then you have Robert Sternberg with his triarchic theory, which boils things down to just 3 types: analytical, creative, and practical, which is basically street smarts. Finally, you have Daniel Goleman, who championed emotional intelligence, or EQ. Imagine successfully navigating a super frustrating group project in class without losing your temper. That is Goleman's EQ in action, effectively managing emotions and relationships. So the main idea is contemporary theories from folks like Gardner, Sternberg, and Goleman strongly argue that being smart includes a massive variety of practical, creative, and emotional skills. It's a much, much bigger picture than just traditional schoolhouse academics.
Next up, Section 4, Measuring Intelligence and Tests. So pivot for a second to practical application. How do we actually put a number on these theories in real schools? Let's quickly track the history of these tests, because these names will definitely pop up in your multiple choice section. It started with the Binet-Simon scale. Now, this was originally just developed to identify kids who were struggling in school and needed extra help, and it gave us the very first concept of a mental age. Then, Louis Terman adapted it into the Stanford Binet scale, and that introduced the famous IQ score we all know today. Finally, we have the modern Wechsler scales, like the WAIS for adults and WISC for children, which evaluate both verbal and performance skills. Now, when millions of people take these tests, their scores form a normal distribution, or what we usually call the bell curve. Just picture that peak right in the middle of the curve. That peak represents a score of 100, which is considered perfectly average. It means the vast majority of the population falls right there in the middle, safely under that big hump. So the main idea is, intelligence testing evolved from simply identifying struggling schoolchildren to complex structured scales like the Stanford Binet and Wechsler tests. And remember to lock this in for your exam. These tests map our scores on a normal distribution curve centered right at that average score of 100. Which brings us to Section 5, What Makes Tests Good? Listen, just because a test exists and gives you a score doesn't mean it's actually a scientifically solid test. This is prime MCQ territory. You have to know the difference between reliability and validity. Reliability means consistency. Validity means accuracy. Think of a broken bathroom scale that's stuck on the exact same wrong number. If you step on it 5 times, it gives you the exact same weight every single time, right? It is highly reliable. It's consistent. But because it's broken, it's not giving you your real weight. Therefore, it is not valid. A good educational test has to be both. It must give stable, reliable scores, and it actually has to validly measure what it claims to measure. But wait, even valid and reliable tests face massive criticisms. Critics argue that IQ tests often measure a really narrow set of skills. Honestly, sometimes they aren't measuring intelligence at all, but simply a student's test-taking ability. Furthermore, standardized tests can contain cultural biases that discriminate against minorities. Relying heavily on IQ scores can lead to permanent, damaging labeling of children, basically deciding their path for them way too early. And while high IQ often correlates to success in life, critics warn this might just be a self-fulfilling prophecy. We treat kids with high scores better, give them more resources, and so, surprise, they succeed. So the main idea is, a high-quality test must be both reliable, meaning consistent, and valid, meaning accurate. But as future educators, we must always remain incredibly critical of how these test scores might unfairly label students or whether they truly lack cultural fairness. All right, the final topic. Section 6, Nature, Nurture, and Diversity. Let's move to the age-old debate and see how this builds. Where does our intelligence actually come from? When researchers look at the correlation of IQ scores among family members, a clear pattern emerges. Even when identical twins are raised completely apart, their IQs remain incredibly similar. But when identical twins are raised together, their IQ scores are nearly identical. This provides huge, undeniable evidence that there is a massive genetic component to intelligence. That, my friends, is the nature argument. But nature is only half the story, right? Your environment, the nurture side, strongly affects IQ. Proper nutrition, access to quality education, and a really rich, supportive classroom environment can drastically elevate a student's abilities. When we look at human diversity, we also find that gender plays no significant role in general intelligence. Men and women are equally smart with only tiny variations in highly specific skills. And when it comes to culture, differences in academic performance are much more frequently linked to cultural attitudes toward hard work and effort, rather than any innate born ability. So the main idea is, intelligence is determined by a really complex, beautiful interaction between our genetics, nature, and our environment, nurture. Human diversity clearly shows us that effort, attitude, and a positive upbringing matter immensely in shaping a bright mind. Heredity and environment are working together the whole time. Which leaves us with this final, thought-provoking question. If both our DNA and our classrooms shape who we are,
What can you do tomorrow to change your own intellectual environment? You know, you can't change your genetics, but you absolutely control the effort you put into learning. Take these simple, step-by-step concepts we just covered, review those everyday examples, and I know for sure you are going to do incredibly well. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Best of absolute luck on your educational psychology final. You've totally got this.